Well, I think there's an H myth, a homeschooling myth that we have, that homeschooling will solve our problems. And if we can just homeschool the children, then everything will go well, right? And then we start homeschooling, and this is the same with parenting, as we have kids, and we're exhausted. The house isn't getting clean, the kids aren't getting their schoolwork done, the records are behind, we're working morning, noon, and night, we're having to do the instruction, so we're basically hand-holding our student through every step of the lesson, and we're exhausted, we're frustrated with our spouses, we're frustrated with the dog, we're frustrated with the neighbors. Is there a better way to homeschool? Good morning, moms and Master Books. Hope you're having a fantastic week. Hey, do you ever feel like homeschooling your children is maybe the toughest job ever? That just keeping up with everything and keeping the kids going, sometimes it's just too much for one person. Well, let's talk about that today. In my description, I mentioned there's a book called E-Myth, and E-Myth is a very popular business book that talks about a lot of people have a job, and then they feel like, well, you know what, if I had my own business, like let's say I'm a baker and I bake for people. And so I work for a bakery and I bake and I work from 9 to 5. And I think, boy, I would love someday to own my own bakery because all my dreams will come true if I own my own bakery. And so the opportunity comes and I start my own bakery. And now instead of working 9 to 5, I'm actually working at 5 in the morning, getting the ovens fired up. And then I'm working around the clock, right? And I'm working late into the night cleaning up. And now I've got to work weekends and I got to make trips places to pick up more supplies. And then I'm falling behind on the bills and I've got to hire people. And this 9 to 5 job about I didn't like working for somebody else. Now I have a job where I'm working 100 hours a week instead of 40 hours a week. I'm making less money and I'm more stressed than I ever was. And instead of having my own business, now I have a job and it's the worst job I've ever had. Well, so Michael Gerber wrote the book E-Myth, and that's basically the premise is the entrepreneurial myth, E-Myth. Entrepreneurial myth is that when we have a business, it'll solve all of our problems and it's better than being an employee. But it's not if we're not careful about it. And so what Michael proposes in the book is systemizing a business so that you create a business that runs without you. You have the experience of being a baker. So instead of creating a position where now you are the baker and business owner, you create a system, an environment, and processes where you hire a baker who does the baking, and you hire an accountant who does the books, and you hire somebody to make sure the store is open and closed, and then you oversee that because you have the experience of being a baker, but you don't create a job for yourself. You basically create a process, a system, an environment that creates a job for you. So it's really kind of mind-blowing because you see so many people who have plumbing businesses and lawn businesses and all of this, and instead of creating systems that produces an income, and that's essentially when you have a business, it should be producing an income, not creating more jobs for yourself, okay? So it's mind-blowing and it's revolutionary if you have a business to start thinking about what I need to do is replacing myself. And I do that by creating systems and creating owner's manual essentially for my business. So I hire somebody to come in, and I don't want them to come in and create a new business. I hire them to come in and just look at the sheet, and it says, when you get to the store at 5 o'clock, turn the oven on, then go and make sure that the muffins are started, whatever, right? And you follow this to the T. That way, tomorrow, if that person quits, I just hire another person who's capable, bring them in, and they look at the sheet and say, okay, 5 o'clock, start the ovens, 6 o'clock, make sure the biscuits are started, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And this is very valuable for a lot of us who are, if you're pastoring a church, it's important to know what happens if you're not present. Can the church run without you? Do they know who unlocks the door on Sunday mornings? I had kind of gotten myself into that spot where if I wasn't coming in on a Sunday morning, I didn't get there an hour early to make sure the heat was on, to make sure, the driveway was cleared off, to make sure all these things were happening, then church didn't go on. And then when I would get sick, it would just be terrible because I'd have to fight through that. There was no mechanism in place for things to just run smoothly without me. So I learned a lot from E-Myth. If you have a business, I certainly recommend that book is a good place to start. If you're beginning to feel like, I wish I could just go back to the 9-to-5 job as opposed to working 1,000 hours a week, having to do what I used to do plus everything else, and now I'm making less money. So how does that relate to homeschooling? Well, I think there's an H-myth, a homeschooling myth that we have, that homeschooling will solve our problems. And if we can just homeschool the children, then everything will go well, right? And then we start homeschooling. And this is the same with parenting as we have kids, and we're exhausted. The house isn't getting clean. The kids aren't getting their schoolwork done. The records are behind. We're working morning, noon, and night. We're having to do the instruction. So we're basically hand-holding our student through every step of the lesson, and we're exhausted. We're frustrated. We're frustrated with our spouses. We're frustrated with the dog. We're frustrated with the neighbors. Is there a better way to homeschool? After 25 plus years of homeschooling, well, I don't know if it's quite that much, pretty close. What I would say is, yeah, there are things we can do to make life easier, a lot following along with like the E-Myth, that we can put systems in processes in place to help remove the need for us in the day. With Kristen is excellent at this, with 9 kids in the home, and sometimes she was homeschooling. I think at one time she had 6 kids she was homeschooling. We homeschooled in New York State, which is a very difficult state to homeschool in. You have to submit quarterly reports. You have to do standardized testing. You have to do plans of instruction for all the students, and there's just a lot of record keeping that's required. She developed a lot of systems to kind of just help. It was plug and play for things. And while it was still a lot of work, she was able to create systems that could help her manage every year and month to month, even in seasons when all of life was happening. Besides that, the systems continued to go on. Years ago, our family, we probably only had 4 kids at the time, and we visited one of these living villages where they take old houses and bring them in and set them up. And then you can come in and kind of see what it was like to live in a house from early 1900s or a Victorian style house, a log cabin. And the name of the place is Genesee Country Village up in Western New York. And there was a cabin there. And this cabin, I think I've told the story before, but this cabin had 10 people living in it. The husband had, I think it was 9 or 10 children, so maybe there was 11 people living there. His wife had died giving birth to the last child. And so now you have a widower husband with 9 kids. They're living in a 1-room cabin in Western New York, which sometimes can be a very harsh climate weather-wise. And the lady said something profound to us. She said, the success of the family depended upon everybody working together. And if they didn't work together, they weren't going to survive. And that moment, I still have a picture of the kids in front of that cabin. I hold it dearly because that moment became kind of a pivotal spot for us as parents to realize that if we were going to survive being a large family and homeschooling and serving in ministry and all the capacities that we did, we were going to have to do it as a family. And we were only going to survive if every family member began pitching in and doing their part. And so to this day, the family members each have chores and responsibilities. for a lot of years, our older kids have been responsible for doing the grocery shopping. We have one of our kids who's responsible for cooking supper every night. And that responsibility has been passed on. Some of our kids have been excellent cooks, and it's been fun to watch when they got married and they were used to cooking for 9 people. Even my boys, I have one son who really was a phenomenal cook, and when he got married, he can still do a phenomenal job cooking, and he was trained for it. He knows how to go to the grocery store to buy all the meals, put the meal together, and cook. Different things that we've been able to do as a family and the processes that we have and the systems. There's no question whose job is it to cook supper. We know tonight who is going to cook supper. Sometimes they bicker and they try to buy each other off, but for the most part, I know whose responsibility that is. Whose job is it to make sure the dog has water and that they get out and get back in? Whose job is it to make sure the laundry comes down and back in? Those type of things. They help eliminate the constant need for mom and dad to be the brain of the household. So if we can create systems and processes that help us navigate this every day, and some of the things that we found in our schooling that helps is I'm going to go over them, is the following things, but sometimes we need to have resets as well. So we're kind of in a reset stage again as the school year has started. Some of the things every year we address and kind of determine what's the best way, and you have to make adjustments because sometimes now I have some older daughters who have been very crucial in helping grocery shop and things like that. Well, they're becoming more active outside of the home, so it's harder to depend on making sure there's always milk in the refrigerator and that type of thing. So we have to do resets. But there's a couple things that we've learned with homeschooling that I'll share with you that might help, that might not help. One is a schedule. And I know Kristen has showed her schedule in the past, but the schedule of every day school starts at, say, 9 o'clock. And we expect you to be at your desk at 9 o'clock. You get up, you get breakfast, do whatever it takes. But at 9 o'clock, you're expected to be dressed and at your desk. Now, again, sometimes we have to do resets for this, but just having a time that everybody starts school, if mom is sick or having to go for chemo treatments or working, it doesn't really matter because they all know that they're to get up and to go and do to start school at that time. I think one of the neatest things about tablets and phones and that type of thing is you can create multiple alarms. So if you had a tablet, you could easily create a Monday through Friday buzzer system or bell system, like some of us might have had in school. So at 9 o'clock, the bell dings, and that means school starts. At 10:30, we're going to take a half an hour break, and the bell dings, and that means it's break time. At 11 o'clock, the bell dings. That means get back to your desk. It's time for school. At 12, the bell dings. It's time for lunch. That type of thing. So you could create some structures that just help train everybody that when you're not present or the phone rings or you're dealing with a crisis, it doesn't matter. Nothing changes. The system and the process is there. So I don't have to be the brain to say it's 9 o'clock, you need to go sit at your desk. Everybody is trained for that process. So I think that that's something that we can do. You may not like schedules, and that's okay. Maybe they're too limiting. But for somebody who's really struggling and you find out that, oh, great, it's 1 o'clock in the day and we still haven't done school, and you feel that tension and that stress just always on you, maybe just setting up a manageable schedule that at least puts everybody in their desk and in school mode at a certain time, and then maybe a time that bell goes off and says, okay, school's done, or that type of thing. So that was one that really helped, was having some structure to the day. Now think about it. When I talked at the beginning of this, I talked about how businesses need to have some systems and structures and processes in place because otherwise you have to be the brain for everything. Well, in a way, education system is very systemized. There's a lot of processes in a public education system. What time school starts, when the bell goes off, when they do math, when they do language, what days are gym, what days are art. All of these things are very structured, and they provide kind of a map that you just go through. And by the time, you almost become brainless going through it. But we are creatures of habit, and we tend to follow the habits that we create. And in a way, we need to create systems and processes in our own homes that provide that structure as well. So schedules is one way. Instruction is another. And beginning the Master Books curriculum, what we love to have in our curriculum is where the transition occurs very early and very quickly from me needing to sit at the table or you needing to sit at the table and teach each lesson to beginning to put that burden onto the student and let them be responsible for their own learning. Now, oftentimes, that may happen third, fourth grade when a student is able to start reading and doing it. Kristen in our homeschool always has herself, she's available for them to come and ask questions. And as they get a little bit older, as they move into third, fourth, fifth grade, she transitions more and more of that to them, where she's giving them, need to figure this out type thing. But overall, by the time a student is in junior high and high school, they should be pretty much responsible for reading the content, doing the work, and getting the materials. So you're not necessary to have to sit there with them all day long, making sure that they're motivating themselves, doing the work, and completing it. It's a process, right? But if I can give you a phrase that I love, it's we teach what we tolerate. We teach what we tolerate. So if you tolerate the student not taking any responsibility for their learning, not having to be in a little discomfort and pain because they're not doing it, then you're teaching them that it's okay to make you be the brain. And so in your home and school environment, in the environment that you have, business environment, ministry environment, anything else, think of it through that lens. I teach what I tolerate. Is this because I'm tolerating something that I should maybe change and say we're no longer tolerating this? So self-guided instruction, I think, is another way that you can really make it so your homeschool runs flawlessly without you. Flawlessly, isn't that a dream? But you make it so that if something happens, it doesn't matter. The kids can still go on. And there have been times where Kristen and I have gone out of town or had another commitment, and the kids have been able to continue moving forward because they have the ability to continue. Everything is set up for them to look at the work, do the work, and even score their work. So if you watch Kristen's video on her classroom, you'll see that she had kind of a scoring station set up where the kids will do their work, then they'll get up and go score their work and come back. We only score quizzes and tests in our homeschool. And I have been known to like at the end of a course, score their quizzes and tests. And if they didn't pass, make them do the course over again for a life lesson to understand that, even today, everything that I do today has consequences on my future. And so I need to be aware of that. And I need to make sure that every day I bring my best game, because sometimes our kids will be like, they won't put much into it, right? Knowing that we'll catch it on the correction. And then they'll fight us on the correction. They won't really study the test because they know that we're going to work with them to pass the test. I don't want to train my kids that way. I want to train them to be responsible for their own learning, and that it's a pass or fail type thing. I'm not going to hold their hand through that process. So again, just some tips that we've learned and do and recommend. And all of these, we say, do what works best for your family. But we hate it to see people struggle because they've never been introduced to some of these concepts. Okay, record keeping. Record keeping, having a system where you can just make sure that the records are kept. We did develop the cumulative record at Master Books. We can, if somebody's watching that wants to post a link, or I can post a link to the cumulative record. It gives like a progress report that you could do for your student once a quarter. It gives an annual record keeping where you can keep track of what subjects you're doing, the grades that you're giving, so that you have at least a system to help keep you accountable to and on track for the future. So having some system to be able to do record keeping to keep you on task is another way. And then one of the last things I'll touch on is chores. And I did a little bit about our family, but having the success of the family depends upon everybody working together. And so if in your home, the house doesn't stay clean unless you clean it, the food doesn't get bought unless you bought it, it doesn't get cooked unless you cook it, the kids don't get schooled unless you school them, nothing happens unless you're the brain, then how long can you sustain that? How long can you be everybody's brain? Or can you start training the rest of the family to function with processes and systems? And you know, maybe you have a hard time letting go of control. Maybe you're a bit of a perfectionist, and the thought of having the kids do the floor is just mind-blowing that they would even be able to do that. I understand that because Kristen was a perfectionist, and it hasn't always been easy letting us help and come alongside. But at the same time, what I found is if we have a way to make life easier for everybody, so the right tools for the job, right? So you want to make sure that the broom and the mop are always in the same spot and it's easy to access. And that the kitchen, you always have, we use this type of dishwasher detergent. This is the cupboard where cups go. Although I don't know that they ever get it, but the more you can set up some systems for your kids to follow with their chores, the easier it is. So it's not just mop the floor. It's first we're going to sweep the floor, then we're going to pick up anything that's on the floor. We're going to sweep the floor. We're going to mop the floor. I still have to work on this sometimes with my 19-year-olds and 20-year-olds. And then we're going to clean up the dusts and dirt from sweeping, right? Follow the system type thing. But once we begin training them that this is what your chore is, this is what you're responsible for, and this is how things move forward, I think that it's a great way to begin training the family for having their own household. So each of our kids, when they've left the house, they may not always like it, but they're at least trained in how to do laundry, how to clean, how to buy groceries, how to cook, how to mow, how to trim, all of the skills that are necessary to have their own households and families. So chores are definitely a big one. Now, motivation. I had somebody I worked with, he had a large family, and he said, in Proverbs it says, if a man does not work, he does not eat. And we don't do this very often, but there are times where we've said, listen, chores are, if we eat at 5 or 5:30, all of the chores that you have need to be done by that time, or you don't eat until it's done. And just a good way of reinforcing that, we don't starve our kids, we don't force them to have to eat, but that principle of supper is a privilege. If I don't go to work, if I don't do my job today, my family will begin to go hungry. And each of us has to do our task. Well, this is an important skill for all of us to learn, right? That we work so we can eat. We work so we can have a car. We work so we can have privileges. So maybe it's not eating dinner. Maybe it's something else like your privileges of gaming. I actually just bought I think the device is called a Bob, and you plug your TV or gaming system into it, and it has PIN numbers, and you can assign each of your kids a PIN number and a certain amount of time, and they can turn on the TV for 20 or 30 minutes for a day if that's the daily amount, and at the end of that time it warns them, and then it shuts off the power and they can no longer access that. So there are tools that you get to say, this is a friction point in our home, this is a place where I can't always be their brain to say, how long have you been playing this game? How long you're only supposed to be on for 30 minutes a day, and now you've been on for an hour. How long are we going to do this? So what I look for is devices and mechanisms or processes or systems that I can put in place to replace me that make it easier for me to manage a large family in a household. The goal is so you don't have to be the brain of everybody in the house, that they can all use their own brains to accomplish the goal of keeping the house looking clean and orderly and well managed, that they can be somewhat educated and somewhat normal looking when they go out. These are all tasks that we deal with of, combing their hair, the outfits they wear. And I don't know about your family. My family's not far from perfect in this. Some Sundays they come down to get in the car, and I'm like, I don't even know where we begin. The outfits they choose, and wrinkled is the most fashionable thing that they have because they put away their own laundry, and we have to do some resets. But those are the things we strive for, and some of the things that we have learned that default when we do a reset, it definitely comes back to, can we put a system in place that helps us manage this a little bit better and puts the burden of having a brain back in their court. So let's see. A couple other tips that I would give you is, if you're in this area, don't beat yourself up. This is normal. I think this is part of every family's existence, is learning how to self-manage and learning how to keep things going without killing mom, right? I mean, if you have 11 people in the house, more than one person should be contributing to the house. And so how can we do that? But if that's the situation you have, you grow and change in small increments. It doesn't have to be done overnight. And so don't beat yourself up because systems are needed in certain areas. Just do little changes at a time. In Atomic Habits, the author calls it growth habit stacking, where you say, you know what, we eat breakfast at 8:30, so as soon as breakfast is over, we're going to start school at 9:15. And now you've kind of created a habit based on a habit that's already existing. And you can do different things, but just implement one change at a time. What's the worst thing that you have going on right now in your homeschool or the home climate that you can address by putting a system or a process in place? A schedule, a routine, beginning to choose solutions that allow them to be independent as opposed to needing to be taught, anything like that. So give yourself the opportunity for growth, make small changes, give warnings. So there have been times where we've brought everybody together and said, hey guys, it's time for a change. This is what we're going to be doing. And this is what we expect. And these are the consequences for not doing that. So we've never said, they came to the table and we said, you're not eating today because you didn't do your chores. That was always a clear understanding. And almost every time we give grace with one warning that says, okay, remember we said this was a consequence. You weren't going to be able to play the game system if you didn't do your chores, and you didn't do that. So go do your chores, but we'll let you play, but this is your one warning. After that, you'll lose that privilege for that day or that week or whatever. So kind of preparing and training them softly rather than harshly, but let them know that it's not just you're doing this because we're the boss. We're doing this because this is how we survive as a family. I need them to make sure there's groceries in the cupboard, and I need them to make sure that they're helping and doing their part. I'm doing my part today, and I'm making sure that they have the resources and they have the tools and they have everything they need to succeed, and we all need to contribute to do that. And I don't think it's unfair to ask our kids to participate in that. I think that's part of the process of preparing them. That's strengthening them to be able to have their own homes and their households and to lead their families well. Now, I don't think that they should be overburdened. I don't think it's fair to make them stay up all night with a baby. That's not at all what I would propose. But there are age-appropriate chores that they can do that can help make the home run smoother and free us up. And what happens is when we allow them to start doing chores and participating, then it gives us a more capacity in our lives to give back to our families. I am only able, as a vessel, right? There's only so much you can fit in this vessel before it begins to spill over. And if I want health, I need to make sure that there's always some capacity here. And that means sometimes letting go of things or not doing things that would fill that cup and take away from capacity. By beginning to assign tasks and delegate some things out to the family, or to create some systems that make it easier, the system becomes the brain of the family, I'm able to gain some capacity in my life. And those are things that, burning out from parenting and homeschooling and ministry and business and all of these things are things that we've done in the past. And we've had to be very intentional about resetting and gaining some capacity. Sometimes you just have to shoulder in and muscle through it, but that doesn't last very long before you begin to suffer with your health, or you begin to suffer emotionally, and you begin taking it out on people and that type of thing. So I think the process of realizing that we can't do it all, and we don't want to do it all, it's not healthy for those around us, is an important thing to realize. Okay, so hopefully there was some blessing in this for you. You got some tips. Feel free to comment for a chance to have 2,500 reward points added to your account. The teaching tips, when you gain some insight or something like that, be sure to let us know and comment in the post that you got some tips that meant something and your family found a way to implement something, because it really helps us understand what ways we can continue providing teaching tips, what teaching tips are providing the most bang for the buck, if you will, in this group, and what's helping, what kind of needs our families that are represented here have. So, okay. Hey, well, God bless you all. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your week and a great weekend. I hope you find some ways to build capacity into your life so that you can enjoy life, so that you can thrive in life, not just survive life. We survived life for a lot of years, and it just wasn't worth it. It wasn't fun. And I have, Kristen does something now that I absolutely love. I adore this about her. She is an avid scrapbooker. I mean, she loves to scrapbook. And I know scrapbookers are competitive, so I make sure that she has, I say this is my joke, I make sure she has the best tools for the trade. Because when she goes to some of these scrapbook conventions, like they're hotel takeovers where they go in and they have rooms, or they'll actually take over like a huge hall or a building, and they do this for 3 or 4 days. So she'll travel to these things. Now, she's not that bad. She packs in the back of the car, but there are people who actually bring in U-Hauls full of scrapbooking equipment and paper and everything. And there can be, I think one event that she goes to has like 400 scrapbookers, and she'll go in for the whole weekend. Some of the girls will go with her, and they just have a fantastic time. She does this to have capacity, right? To actually have a life outside of me and the kids and a home, is just to have something to look forward to that's her hobby and uniquely hers. And I'd love to have her talk about it sometime as well, because I think it's so healthy and it's so much fun to see her enjoy connecting with other people and developing friendships, and to have the opportunity to be a human outside of being a wife and a mom and constantly under our demands. And we always survive. The house may not be like it was when she left, but we just know and expect that that's something that she does for herself in order to have capacity. So sometimes in those realms, it's being able to step out and give yourself permission and give yourself a break to be human and to be you and to enjoy the things that you enjoy. So something hopefully we can talk about at a future time. All right. Hey, God bless you guys. I hope you have a fantastic weekend. And what a privilege and an honor it is to serve this community and to serve your families.